She was married for 12 years, but there was one house her husband never let her enter. After his death, she opened the door, and what she found changed everything. Never go near that house. Promise me. Those 6 words echoed in Anna's mind like a curse. Her husband Richard had said them every time she even mentioned that strange little house at the end of the forest road. He never raised his voice, but the look in his eyes, cold, stern, and filled with something close to fear, was enough to silence her. At first, Anna thought it was just one of his eccentric habits. Richard was a private man, a thinker, a person who preferred silence over explanations. She used to laugh it off and tease him about having a mystery man's hideout. He would smile softly, kiss her forehead, and say, "Some places are better left untouched, my love." But as the years passed, the curiosity grew stronger. They had been married for nearly a decade, and yet there were entire parts of his life Anna knew nothing about. Richard was a successful architect, always traveling between projects, always surrounded by blueprints and sketches. But one place remained completely off limits. The forest house, as she called it. It wasn't far, maybe a 30-minute drive from their main home. She had seen it once, from a distance, hidden behind tall oak trees, its chimney releasing a thin curl of smoke into the winter sky. She remembered asking him that day, "Why don't we stay there sometime? It looks beautiful." Richard had gone pale. "No, Anna," he said quietly. "That place is not for us. Never go there. Promise me." It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. His voice carried a strange tremble, like someone trying to hide pain under control. From that day on, she stopped asking, but in her heart, the question never left. Sometimes late at night, Anna would wake up and realize Richard's side of the bed was empty. She'd find him sitting by the window, lost in thought, staring at the moonlight, as if it reminded him of something, or someone. Once, when she softly touched his shoulder and whispered, "Are you okay?" He turned to her with a faint smile and said, "I just miss the things I can't change." Then he'd go back to bed and hold her tighter, as if afraid she might vanish too. People in the neighborhood whispered about the forest house. Some said Richard was working on a secret government project. Others hinted at something darker, that he was hiding another woman. Anna hated those rumors, but in her weakest moments, even she couldn't help wondering. She tried to be the perfect wife, kind, patient, trusting, but a small part of her always burned with quiet doubt. Why would a loving husband hide something so completely? Still, no matter how much it hurt her curiosity, she kept her promise. She never crossed the invisible line he had drawn, never drove down that lonely road again, never asked about the key she once found in his coat pocket, shaped like a tiny golden heart. But she couldn't forget his words, the way he looked at her when he said them. "Never go near that house. Promise me." Anna had laughed it off back then, thinking it was just a secret workshop or maybe a surprise project. She had no idea that those words would one day become the key to unraveling the deepest, most heartbreaking secret of her life. Because sometimes the places we are told not to enter are the ones that hold the truths we are meant to find. The night it happened, the sky was crying. Heavy rain poured down in endless sheets, and thunder rolled over the hills like a warning. Anna was waiting at home, pacing near the window, listening to the wind slam against the glass. Richard had promised he'd be back before dinner. He was never late, never. But that night, something felt wrong. His phone wasn't answering. The clock ticked past midnight. The soup on the table went cold. Then came the knock. 2 police officers stood at the door, their uniforms wet from the storm, faces solemn. Anna's heart sank before they even spoke. "Mrs. Carter, there's been an accident." Her mind froze. The words that followed, car crash, instant death, "We're sorry," blurred into noise. The world tilted, the walls closed in, and she felt herself fall into darkness. Richard Carter, her husband, her best friend, the man who told her never to open that house door, was gone forever. Days turned into weeks. The funeral came and went like a dream she couldn't wake from. People filled her house with flowers and sympathy, but when the last guest left and the silence returned, the reality hit her like a wave. She was alone. Anna stopped opening the curtains. She barely ate. She sat for hours staring at the chair where Richard used to read, waiting for his voice to break the silence. Every corner of the house whispered memories, his laughter, his scent, his warmth. But one question refused to leave her mind. What was he hiding in that forest house? She remembered the strange key she had seen once, the golden one with a heart-shaped handle. It had vanished after she mentioned it. And now, without him, everything about that secret place began to haunt her thoughts. One morning, while sorting through his office files, she opened a drawer filled with old papers and blueprints. Buried beneath them, wrapped in a small cloth, she found it again, the golden key. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. A small tag hung from the chain, the words carefully written in his handwriting. For the forest house. Her chest tightened. It felt like a message meant for her, left behind, waiting. For hours, she sat staring at it, torn between fear and curiosity. She could almost hear his voice. "Promise me, Anna. Never go there." But now he was gone. The promise had died with him. Hadn't it? Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "If you didn't want me to go, why leave the key?" Deep down, she knew, some part of him wanted her to find it. Maybe not when he was alive, but one day, when she was ready. That thought grew stronger every hour. She needed to know the truth. She needed to understand the man she loved. So, on a cold Sunday morning, Anna packed her coat, took the golden key, and drove toward the forest road, the one she had avoided for 10 long years. The road wound through tall, silent trees. The air smelled of pine and rain. Every turn made her heart beat faster. When she finally reached the end of the road, she saw it, the little house standing lonely among the shadows of the forest. Its windows were dark, its roof covered in leaves. It looked forgotten, untouched by time, yet it felt alive, as if it had been waiting for her. Anna parked the car, stepped out, and stood still. Her fingers tightened around the golden key. The house her husband had forbidden her from entering was right in front of her now. And for the first time, she was about to break the only promise she had ever made to him. The house stood silently before her, half hidden by the shadows of the tall pines. For years, it had been nothing more than a mystery, a forbidden place she was never allowed to touch. Now it stood there like a living memory, waiting to breathe again. Anna's heart pounded as she walked up the narrow stone path. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her feet. The closer she came, the colder the air felt. The front door was old, but strong, painted a deep shade of blue now faded to gray. She reached out and ran her hand along the wood. It was damp and cold, almost as if the house itself was aware of her presence. She hesitated. Her husband's voice whispered in her mind again, "Promise me, Anna, never go there." But she whispered back softly, trembling, "I'm sorry, Richard. I have to know." With a deep breath, she took the golden key and slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for this single moment. Click. The door creaked open slowly, releasing a faint sigh of air, old, heavy, and full of secrets. She stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, seeping through half-closed curtains. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and something sweet, like dried flowers. Everything was perfectly still. The living room was small but warm, a fireplace filled with ashes, a bookshelf stacked neatly with storybooks, and a soft blue couch with a blanket folded carefully on top. It didn't look like a secret hideout. It looked lived in, loved. Her eyes moved to the walls, and that's when her breath caught. Dozens of framed photographs hung neatly in rows. Each one showed Richard, smiling, laughing, holding a little girl. A little girl with light brown hair and the same soft blue eyes as Anna. For a moment, she froze. Her mind refused to understand what she was seeing. In every picture, the man she had loved so deeply looked happier than she had ever seen him before. And beside him, the child, 7 or 8 years old, her tiny hand wrapped around his. Who was she? Anna's hands began to shake. She moved closer to one of the photos. The girl was blowing candles on a birthday cake, and Richard was right behind her, helping her cut it, smiling with pride. Tears welled up in Anna's eyes. No, she whispered. No, this can't be real. Her thoughts spiraled. Had he lied to her? Was this another family? Another life he had hidden from her? Her knees weakened. She clutched the wall to steady herself. Then something else caught her eye. A small wooden door at the back of the room, half open. A faint smell of lavender drifted from it. She walked toward it slowly, her heart thundering. Inside was a small bedroom painted soft pink. A little bed stood under the window, neatly made with a teddy bear resting on the pillow. Toys and coloring books lay on the shelf, untouched for years. And on the bedside table, a picture frame with a note beneath it. The note read, in Richard's familiar handwriting, "Emily, Daddy loves you, always." Anna's world stopped. Emily. The name echoed in her mind like a whisper from another time. Who was Emily? Why had Richard never spoken of her? Her hands trembled as she picked up the photo. Richard's eyes looked so gentle, filled with love and something else, sorrow. At that moment, Anna knew this was not just about betrayal or secrets. There was something deeper, something painful. As the wind rustled the curtains and the golden light faded through the window, Anna whispered softly, "Richard, what have you been hiding from me?" Her tears fell silently onto the photo, and in that still, forgotten house, where every wall seemed to hold a memory, she knew she was standing at the edge of a truth that could either break her or set her free. Anna stood in the small pink room, surrounded by silence thick enough to hear her heartbeat. Every inch of this place told a story she was never meant to see. The bed, the teddy bear, the books, all perfectly arranged, untouched by time, as if waiting for their owner to return. But the air carried sadness. It wasn't a child's laughter she felt here. It was loss. A deep, aching loss. On the study table lay a small stack of drawings, each one made by a child's hand. Stick figures of a man and a little girl holding hands under a bright sun. At the bottom of every picture, written in colorful crayons, were the words, "Me and Daddy." Tears blurred Anna's vision. Her hands trembled as she turned each page. Then, underneath the drawings, she found a sealed white envelope, thick, old, and slightly yellowed with age. On the front, written in Richard's handwriting, were the words, "To my beloved Anna." For a long moment she couldn't move. Her throat tightened as a cold wave of realization washed over her. Richard knew she would come here one day. He had planned this moment. She slowly tore open the envelope, her hands shaking, and began to read the letter inside. "My dearest Anna,
If you are reading this,
it means I am no longer in this world. Please don't cry, my love. What I kept from you was never out of shame or mistrust. It was out of love. Years before I met you, I was married to a woman named Laura. She was kind, gentle, and the light of my life. But fate had other plans. During childbirth, I lost her. She gave me our daughter, Emily, and left this world before she could even hold her. Emily was the only piece of Laura I had left. But she was born very sick. Her lungs were weak, and doctors said she wouldn't survive long in the city's polluted air. I built this house near the forest, far from everything, to give her the peace and care she needed. For years, this little house became our world. I worked in the city during the week and spent every weekend here with Emily, reading to her, playing with her, showing her the stars her mother used to love. She loved painting the sky. You'll probably find her drawings here. They were her dreams, the ones I couldn't save. When she passed away, I couldn't let go. I couldn't bear the thought of this house being empty. So I kept coming back, not to hide something from you, but to feel her presence again. When you came into my life, Anna, you brought me peace I never thought I'd feel again. But I was afraid that if you knew about Emily and Laura, the pain in my past would haunt you too. You deserved happiness, not my grief. That's why I asked you never to come here, not because of secrets, but because this place holds too many tears. Please forgive me, my love. And if someday you do walk through these doors, hold no anger. Only remember that I loved you with all that was left of me. Yours forever, Richard." As Anna finished reading, tears streamed down her face. She pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed. her cries echoing softly through the small room. She looked around, at the toys, the tiny shoes, the soft pink walls, and suddenly, everything made sense. Richard hadn't been a liar. He had been a broken man, carrying the weight of 2 graves in his heart. The house wasn't a secret of betrayal. It was a sanctuary of love, a quiet place where a father mourned his child, and a husband remembered his first love. Anna sat by the little bed, tracing her fingers across the name Emily, carved into the wooden frame. She whispered through her tears, "I wish I had known you, sweet girl. You had your father's smile." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees like a whisper from beyond, gentle, comforting, almost as if Richard himself was saying, "Now you know, my love. Now you understand." The sun began to set through the forest window, casting a golden glow across the room. And for the first time since his death, Anna didn't feel angry or confused. She felt peace and a strange warmth in her heart, as though the house itself had finally let go of its sadness. Bilkul. Yahan hai section 5, the final goodbye ka expanded 500 plus words version. ये कहानी का इमोशनल क्लाइमैक्स और पीसफुल एंडिंग है। यूट्यूब स्टोरी टेलिंग के लिए लिखा गया है। स्मूथ नरेशन, सिनेमैटिक टोन और दिल को छू लेने वाला कंक्लूजन। Section 5, The Final Goodbye, expanded 500 words. The sun was setting beyond the forest, turning the sky a deep shade of orange and gold. Anna sat quietly on the porch of the little house, the letter still clutched in her hands. The air felt softer now. The silence, once heavy and haunting, had turned calm, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, she felt close to Richard again. She looked up at the clouds drifting lazily across the sky and whispered, "Oh, Richard. All this time you carried this pain alone. You protected me from it, didn't you?" A cool breeze brushed against her cheek and she closed her eyes. For a brief moment she could almost feel his touch, gentle, reassuring, like the way he used to hold her hand on cold nights. The forest seemed to breathe around her. Birds began to sing softly as the last light of day faded. It felt as though nature itself was wrapping her in quiet comfort. Anna stood and walked back inside, taking one last look around. The living room, the photographs, the tiny pink bedroom. Each corner now told a different story than before. Not a story of lies, but of love, loss, and a father's devotion. She walked over to the small bed where Emily once slept. Gently, she placed a single white rose on the pillow beside the teddy bear and whispered, "Rest peacefully, sweet girl. Your father loved you more than life itself, and I promise I'll keep your memory alive." Then, she folded Richard's letter neatly, kissed it softly, and placed it on the bedside table, right next to the photo of father and daughter smiling together. Tears still glistened in her eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were tears of understanding, of forgiveness. She took one last slow walk around the little house, her fingers brushing over the furniture, the drawings, the photos on the walls. Every step felt like a goodbye, not to her husband, but to the grief that had bound her for so long. When she reached the front door, she turned back once more. The house stood silent but no longer sad. The light of dusk streamed gently through the window, touching every surface like a blessing. Anna whispered softly, "Thank you, Richard. Thank you for loving me enough to protect me, and for trusting me enough to let me find the truth." She stepped outside, locked the door gently, and hung the golden key around her neck. It wasn't just a key anymore. It was a symbol of love that had survived even death. As she walked down the path, the cool evening wind carried the scent of pine and roses. Somewhere behind her a door creaked softly, or maybe it was just her imagination. But she smiled anyway, feeling as if Richard and Emily were finally free. When Anna reached her car, she took one last look at the forest house. The setting sun cast a golden glow over its roof, making it look almost alive, like a guardian of memories too precious to fade. She started the engine and drove away slowly, the golden key shining faintly in the light. For the first time since her husband's death, her heart was light. She understood now, love doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it hides in silence, in secrets, and in the places we are too afraid to open. And as the road curved away from the forest, Anna smiled through her tears and whispered, "Goodbye, my love. And thank you for